Today I'll be cutting glass and breaking rocks because we'll be turning this old terrarium into a mini jungle. The first thing I'll do is take this bad boy out of the animal room and into the garage where I can start taking it apart. I plan on reusing some of the plants, but since most of this setup is covered in mold and other nasty stuff, I'll be throwing some of it out. Now, while I'm cleaning this thing, I want to give you a bit of backstory about this tank. 1 year ago, I converted a small aquarium I found in a thrift store into this terrarium. I decided to record the entire process, but didn't do anything with the footage for about 6 months. Eventually, I uploaded it to Instagram where it received a few hundred views, which was really great. This motivated me to make more content like it, slowly growing this account. Around 2 months ago, I found myself wanting to make long-form content. So I decided to expand and try my luck on YouTube. In a way, this terrarium is the reason why this channel exists. Therefore, I can't have this setup looking this bad. It needs to look great. So that's why we're taking it apart today. The original plan was to take everything out and start over from scratch, but once I removed all of the plants, I realized the background looked better than I thought, so I decided to keep it in there. I did remove the foreground rocks and rinse these off with water. Next, I used a razor scraper to remove all of the nasty gunk from the glass. Ugh. Next, I used a box of wood glue to elevate the tank so I could siphon out the water. But later, I discovered turning the tank upside down was way faster. Originally, this tank was equipped with a waterfall, but once the setup started to become overgrown, the waterfall started to make more and more noise. Due to poor planning on my end, I couldn't easily reach the pump, making cleaning it impossible. Eventually, I decided to just turn off the waterfall. As you can see here, it's really hard to get a pump out, even when the setup is completely emptied. But eventually, I managed to get the pump out from underneath the rock. But then I realized I needed to get a cord out as well, which for some reason I foamed into the background. For a brief moment, I considered cutting the cord, but ultimately decided it was probably a bad idea and I would be better off cutting along the side of the background. After some finicking with various tools, I broke a rock, but also managed to get a cord out without damaging it. This will be great to use in another project. Okay, I know what you're thinking. This guy said he would build a terrarium, but for the last few minutes he's only been taking apart an old tank and rambling on about random stuff. Well, that's because you're not subscribed. The next part of this video is for subscribers only, so if you want to see how I built this tank, you have to subscribe. Okay, it's time to restore this bad boy. The first thing I did was break out the old door. We'll make a new door later on. First, we're gonna silicone some of this moisture wicking mesh onto the sides of the tank. And while we wait for the silicone to cure, we're gonna start making the door. As mentioned before, the old door was made out of acrylic. I used acrylic since it's easier to cut to size, but this time I would like to try and make a door out of glass. I was kind of nervous about cutting the glass. It didn't really feel like the cutting tool did anything, and so I pressed a little harder, ruining the glass. This turned out to be a blessing in disguise though, because now I have a lot of practice material. After giving it a few tries, I started to get a hang of it and dared to try again. This time I almost managed to get it right. The cut was clean, but I didn't measure it correctly, making the piece a little bit too big. No biggie, I thought. I'll just make another line and break off the last bit. I don't know why I thought this would work. Luckily, the third time's a charm and I managed to get the piece I'm after. I sanded down all of the edges to get rid of sharp corners. Now, to turn this piece of glass into a door, we're gonna use silicone. I don't know if this will actually work, but it made sense in my head. I cleaned off the edges of both pieces of glass and masked off all the areas I didn't want to be covered in silicone. What I plan on doing is to create a hinge out of silicon. Once I applied the silicon to the side of the tank and the front of the door, I removed all of the tape and left it to cure for around 30 minutes. After which the silicon was partially cured. I carefully opened the door and removed the tape on the inside. The tank was then left to cure for another 24 hours. The next day I tested our new door and yeah, it works great. It's not perfect, but it's good enough. I quickly made a tiny lock so we can keep the door closed. And since I glued some fabric to the sides, I think it's best to paint the outside black. Now that I'm upgrading everything about this tank, I'd also like to install a few new lights. With all of this upgrading going on, I can't help myself but stain the wood so it will match the other tanks in my collection. Alright, we're here. The tank is empty, clean and redesigned. We can finally start scaping. I started off with a layer of clay balls to create a false bottom. This was then covered with a layer of fabric to separate it from the substrate I'm adding next. The substrate is my usual mix of cocoa fiber, sand, bark and sphagnum moss. I added a thick layer of this and slowed it up towards the back to create a little bit more depth. I also added some damp sphagnum moss into the background. I then placed patches of various kinds of moss throughout the design, some of which were attached to the walls using superglue gel. I grabbed the fern from the old tank and placed it in the back corner of this new design. I then started to play around with a few pieces of spiderwood, trying to go for branches, I think. Kind of happy with the placement, I planted a Bucephalandra and some sphagnum moss. And after adding one more piece of wood and a lot more pieces of moss, this setup started to come to life. A setup like this wouldn't be complete without a few cuttings of oak leaf creeping figs. These were placed throughout. To break things up a bit, I placed a cutting of Opiopogon Kyoto near the middle of the design. The final plant I'll add is a cutting from this Salagenella. I'm placing this near the back. To finish off the design, I added even more moss. And the final step is to close the door. Whoa! We're back in the animal room. That's great. I guess it's time for some beauty shots then. Now as always, thank you so much for watching. I had a lot of fun building this thing and I hope you enjoyed watching me build it. If you somehow made it to the end of this video and find yourself hungry for more, I would recommend you watch this video next to see how I build a paludarium for my baby turtle. I'll see you there.